Good morning. We are reading The Wheel on the School by Maynard DeYoung, pictures by Maurice Sendak. We are on chapter 13, Flotsam and Jetsam. The storm lasted 3 more days. Behind the dike, the ebb tide struggled against the might of the wind and the great elementary need of a tide to obey its laws. But the wind won and held the tide water to the shore. Even in ebb tide, the sea lashed angry and deep. Great waves roared and stormed halfway up the straining dike. Over the houses and village, the wind shrieked. It screamed along the tiles of the roofs, and often it loosened tiles and sent them crashing. Already several windows had been broken by flying roof tiles, and the blinds of the houses in Shora were kept shut throughout the storm days to protect the windows. Inside the cluttered little houses, the fishermen fretted at the delay and the confinement. For 5 days now, each fisherman had been cooped up in his little house. One living room, a hall, and a kitchen. The living room, with its bedding from the closet beds piled over every chair, seemed always to be in the long, awkward process of bed-making. The restless fishermen were growing irritated by the closeness of the dark, shut-up houses, the smell of their own stale tobacco smoke, the babies and the little children that seemed to be always underfoot. The older children could be got out of the way by sending them to school, but there it seemed to the irritated fishermen they did little but agonize about the storm and what it would do to the storks. Mighty little book knowledge was being rammed into their worried heads these miserable, nerve-wracking days. The men were getting as fed up on the talk of storks as they were on playing dominoes. On the 5th day of the storm, Lena's father finally swept the whole mess of dominoes off the table so hard that 2 of them landed in the ash box of the peat stove that his wife was just emptying. "You can't eat dominoes," he exploded. "It seems when I'm not holding a half-wet tot, I'm keeping older kids quiet with dominoes. Dominoes! It's getting so I'm getting spots before my eyes." He grabbed his oiled coat and charged to the door. "I'm readying the boat. By tomorrow this should be over. There's a new note in the wind." He looked at his wife, who was trying to extract the 2 dominoes from the hot ashes into which they had sunk. "Oh, I know I'm the clutter here. Me and my long legs needing a sea." All the fishermen seemed to have reached the breaking point at about the same time. Men came striding from different little houses. The others, hearing their voices in the street, hurried out after them. On the dike, they got busy with nets and gear, in spite of the struggle and double work in the storm. They worked, yelling at each other against the wind, and the wind carried the sounds into the houses. It was good to hear busy sounds outside again. The women breathed more easily and started cleaning the impossible rooms. "Maybe tomorrow we can open doors and windows and let in air," Lena's mother said hopefully. "Who knows, maybe even sunshine. It'd be so good to see the sun again." It had to wait. Even the fishermen had to give the sea and storm another night. If there were a new tone to the wind, and if the storm were flagging, as the fishermen insisted, the sea did not seem to know it. As if by habit, it lashed on and churned and raged behind the dike. But toward night, there was the slightest veering of the north wind, so slight it could be noticed only by a fisherman. The fishermen stood on the dike in a solemn group, sensing the wind change, studying the scudding, angry clouds, almost tasting the change in the salty spray that the sea hurled up at them. To them it all spelled the change, the going out to sea again. They'd be ready to go in the morning, no matter if the sea had not yet reacted to the coming change. They knew the storm was broken. The sea would settle down in time. Fortunately, it being Thursday, this was the day of the arrival of the newspaper, a 2-page, closely printed weekly sheet that brought news of the rest of the country and of far lands. Only 1 copy of the newspaper came to the fishermen of Shora. It passed from hand to hand until the village had literally read it to pieces. No dominoes this long evening. A man had to read the paper when it came, thoroughly, completely, down to the last inky word. but fast. Somebody else was waiting for it. The men read it out loud that Thursday evening so that busy wives and older children could share in it at one and the same time. They watched the clock as they read. By such an hour, it had to be carried to the house next door. The reading of the paper was dull stuff for the children. Dominoes was more fun, but grown-ups tired so soon of games. Now there was little to do but play with the dominoes all by yourself. Set them up on end in a long file like soldiers, then topple the first one and watch them all topple in turn. That way you did some good, too. It kept the younger children interested and quiet so that they didn't interrupt the all-important, almost sacred reading of the newspaper, full of the dull doings of parliaments and ministers and foreign diplomats in strange countries with strange, faraway-sounding names. Auke sat listening to his father's reading. His father held up the paper to point out an unpronounceable word to Auke's mother. Auke glanced at the paper. Suddenly his attention froze on the word Africa. It seemed to leap out at him from among all the other words in the column. He forgot to push down the dominoes he had set up in a curving row for his little brother Jan. He read, "It is thought that the 5-day violent storm raging over the country and all Western Europe will have done unaccountable harm to the influx of storks from Africa. The storm came at the height of the migration. It is feared that all the storks winging their way overseas when the storm hit may have perished. We in Holland can expect most of our nesting places on barns and roofs and in the stork rookeries to remain empty this year. The situation is the more tragic in that of recent years the stork population was beginning to show some gains again. It is estimated that this will set them back for years to come." Auke had read. Now he sat still as if spelling out to himself the meaning of the stilted, heavy words. It was hard to believe, but there it stood in print in the paper. One thing made it horribly believable, though. His father had skipped the item about the storks when he had read that page of the paper out loud. "Push 'em," Auke's little brother Jan pleaded, his eyes on the curving row of dominoes marching across the table. "Push 'em, Auke." Auke pushed them, then he slipped from behind the table. "I've got to go see Pure and Dirk a minute," he said. His mother looked up. "Now, in the storm and rain?" she asked mildly, but she had in her mind what Auke's father was reading. Auke drew on a jacket, bareheaded. He dashed into the rain-swept street. Nobody knew. In every house where the paper had already been read, the news of the storks perishing in the storm had been kept silent. That made it all seem worse. Lena joined Auke and Dirk and Pure. They went on to Yella's house, then to Ailke's. Everybody had to know. But what was there to do? It was in the newspaper, so it was to be believed. It was news. It was fact. There was nothing they could do. It was the storm. God brought storms and hurled big storks into the ocean to become food for fish. They sat stunned in Ailke's kitchen. "But some will get through," Lena said desperately. She was begging for them to agree rather than just stating a fact. "Yeah, but those have gone to all the old places. You know what Giannis said. Only the new storks from last year would look for new places like our school to nest. And Giannis told us on Sunday in church it was the young storks that still had to come. And it's those that went down in the sea." "I wonder if Giannis knows. And the teacher." "Oh, the teacher would know." "Maybe we ought to tell Giannis. Let's go tell Giannis." "But could we all go there?" Yella asked doubtfully. "All us kids? We've never been." But they had to do something. They couldn't sit still.